Alright, we're going to try something a little bit new. This one is Search for the Best, where I look at a particular song and really dive deep into the cultural significance as well as what the song really means, and then different iterations of that song to try to find, what is the be-all, end-all version of that song. So this time I figured to start us all off, why not start with one of the easiest ones, Supper's Ready. So, what's the big deal with Supper's Ready? Well, Supper's Ready is the 6th song off of the 4th studio release by Genesis. It takes up the entirety of Foxtrot's second side, outside of Horizons, being kind of a prelude to it. And coming into this song, the band does very similar things as well as very different things. It's very similar in that it follows very roughly a storyline. There's definitely a narrative flow to it. It does follow suit very heavily with other tracks they've released, most notably the musical box. In fact, when they first started to put this song down, Tony Banks has been saying that he was writing a acoustic guitar theme very similar to the musical box, and that's heard in here as well. By having the 3 harmonizing guitars provides a very dreamlike quality to it.
Walking across the sitting room, I turn the television off. Sitting beside you, I look into your eyes.
And with those 3 harmonizing guitars, it slowly builds into this giant Goliath. But it's also very different in the fact that it's the longest track that the band has ever done, more than doubling the runtime on most of the tracks that had been laid down before. So, actually constructing this song, we have 7 parts within this. Lover's Leap, which is that acoustical ballad. The Guaranteed Eternal Sanctuary Man, which is that first real build-up and payoff that we have. The 3rd part, which I always mispronounce, and you're going to have to apologize me. The It Can Stand and It's a Con and the Band of Merry Men, being another one of that kind of ebb and flow pieces where very much following suit within Lover's Leap and the Guaranteed Eternal Sanctuary Man. And then finally kind of the first real dip being the How Dare I Be So Beautiful, being kind of that surveying of the land and the chaos that has been consumed, and then that kind of reflection of it. Now from there, we dive into Willow Farm, which I'm going to talk a little bit more at length from, and then we get into the bombastic and apocalyptic Apocalypse in 9/8, co-starring the delicious tenements of Gable's Wretched, and then finally closing us off with the 7th piece of Sure as Eggs is Eggs, Arcing Man's Feet. So, let's get into the nitty-gritties of this song and kind of talk about how this song came about in terms of the structure, in terms of the music, and in terms of the themes. First off, let's talk about more of the lyrics and where this song kind of came from. So the song is much like many of Genesis's past songs. The writing credits mainly go to Peter Gabriel, but each member has their hands in the pot. The song, as I had mentioned, is both very similar and very different than most of the songs that have predated it, in that it is a story, but that it's loosely connected with different scenes. Unlike, say, the musical box, Giant Hogweed, Watcher of the Skies, or Get 'Em Out by Friday, being a clear-cut beginning, middle, and end story, this one is much more of a episodic, where it's just scene after very strange scene. This one is more of one where you kind of have to infer and think about the connecting narrative and storyline. Now, the most agreed upon storyline is that these 2 lovers, this couple, sees one another, and through some kind of a either demonic possession or some kind of a otherworldly intervention, are zapped through time and space to view these different sequences, and in some cases even take part in them, only to be zapped back on Earth in the coming apocalypse, where they appear and view this as well, and then finally the second coming of Christ. So that's kind of like the squint your eyes, turn your head, and really concentrate narrative flow of this. And each of those scenes depict some kind of a struggle, some kind of a battle, and some kind of a change of the land. And that is something that Supper's Ready at the core really is about. It's about the changing of the land and how everything is constant and everything is always either in a state of destruction and creation, and how those two really connect themselves. And we see that right from the get-go, where the face that is being seen, and that's kind of that first theme of like, no, something's changed and I can't quite put my finger on it. And we feel that again within, like, say, the battles of It's the Sons and the Band of Merry Men. And it's also within the How Dare I Be So Beautiful, where this person is changed into this person is changed into that. And especially within Willow Farm. Like, Willow Farm really, like, solidifies that within the theme of changing. Like, you're seeing from damn to dumb to mom to, like, mom. But yeah, it's like that all change is that root of the song. And even with Apocalypse at the end, you know, it's that destruction and the creation that comes from it. Now, the origin of this song kind of takes place within the first few notes of this particular piece, and that was when Peter Gabriel with his wife, and he said that there was like almost like his wife was being possessed by this demonic presence. Now, Peter and his wife were also tripping balls at this time, so that was definitely an influence on that, and you can definitely hear that within the sounds. But I digress. The seeds were planted within that moment, and that was where the genesis happened within this. And the writing sequence of this, they had pretty much everything up to How Dare I Be So Beautiful pretty much written, and at that point they had almost written themselves into a corner, and they didn't quite know where to go from there. It wasn't until Peter Gabriel was working on Willow Farm that they decided to take this half-formed song and plunk it right into the middle of the piece. And this was brilliant on a number of ways. And let's kind of dive into this, because Willow Farm is kind of that pinnacle moment within the song where even the band and fans alike recognize that this was the turning point within the song, where it went from being a great song to being a full-on masterpiece. And it was with those 5 descending notes, those, as the band has coined, ugly notes, where Peter Gabriel is very soothingly saying, you know, he's been turned to a flower. And then there's this brief pause, and then we hear a flower, and then we get those 5 notes of bow, 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 bow. And those 5 notes shift the song 180 degrees, and it like basically grabs you and like, nope, we're over here now. And it's a completely different song within Willow Farm. And I keep wanting to say Willow Farm. Willow Farm. Within Willow Farm, it's this quirky piece. It's very optimistic. It's played in a very strange minor major chord sequence, very similar to, say, like Harold the Barrel, which is very different than what we had gotten within, say, the musical box. And then once we get out of Willow Farm, where it's like we end with a whistle, we end with a bang, and all of us fall in our places, the song kind of collapses within the weight that just happened. And then we build up within that next sequence, and that gradual build within the Apocalypse in 9/8. This is where the band really, and I keep wanting to say really shines, but this is when the band really decides to really take it to the next step. Because once you introduce Willow Farm, they like looked at the landscape and they're like, well, let's just do whatever. And damn, did they really do whatever. Like, they really left the space open for Tony Banks to essentially just pull a Keith Emerson and just play.
And I said also the other thing to try and do is to tie it down to just 3 notes, because then I can play any chord I like on top of it, because it was going to be a keyboard solo. So, you know, so we went to... And with just those 3 notes there, you can play any chord you like on that.
And damn, does Tony really build the song from there, and it really opens up, and that is really the build of like this couple, if we want to follow the narrative story, being pulled through all of these different views back to Earth and seeing Earth in this chaotic grounding. Even after the first plateau, where we have that boom, 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 boom. We get that do 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 do, and even there it builds more. And so even once we get to that first plateau, we still have more land to cover. And this is my favorite part of the whole story. Once we get to that final crescendo, and Peter comes back within the vocals, within that 666 is no longer alone, essentially ushering us into the Apocalypse. I love hearing Tony's take on this.
Of it. Again, it was another of those bits, in fact, that I originally intended to have no vocal on, you know. And we were in the studio and I sort of put this in, oh, that sounds great, fantastic. And then Pete suddenly starts saying, oh, I'm going to sing on this. So he starts singing on this. But I was like, oh, no, this is such a great bit with that voice, you know.
After that, you realize you had to build to something, and Peter's work within that such iconic, that 666 is no longer alone. It really solidifies that apocalyptic sense of the devil is here, he's destroying everything, and it's just bam, like it's that explosion. And then finally we get to the final piece, which is As Sure as Eggs is Eggs, and it's just a reworking, a slowed down, more intensive purpose of the first part of the song being the Lover's Leap. And so really that's the entire song. That takes up the full 20-minute runtime. And damn, it's no wonder that this song has been given such the praise that it has. And it's such a staple song. So let's talk a little bit about the live performance of this song as well as covers of this song. So officially, this song has only been released twice in a live format. The first being the Rainbow Center's performance in October of 1973 when they were touring with the Selling England. The second one being the Seconds Out version. And these two versions do very different things for the song. The first version captures the energy that Gabriel brings to it. Even though you can't see it, it does have all the costume changes and all that fun stuff being incorporated in that as well. Within Phil's version, within Seconds Out, this is where Phil is taking on the lead vocal works. And within Seconds Out, Chester Thompson is playing the drums on this. And the thing that distinguishes the two, most notably, is within the Apocalypse in 9/8, we get this slowdown once we get into that second plateau movement within that keyboard solo, where instead of having the rhythm guitar play along with the drums, they remove the rhythm guitar, they remove the drums, so it's only the bass pedals and Tony's keyboards, which provides a very creepy atmosphere to the song. Now, luckily, where this song really shines is within the live recording visuals, and that's what's really needed. And I'm so glad that YouTube offers us a glimpse at this, because, I mean, at this point, it's impossible to see all the original Genesis band members playing this live now. So I'm glad we have YouTubes. And the two most prominent ones that we have within the Gabriel era is the BBC live version, where there's no studio audience and they're just playing it live. We have the full costume changes that Gabriel has with, you know, the first all black sequence. We then have the A Flower, where it's the flower sequence. And then we finally have that Magog sequence within the Apocalypse 9/8, where it's those triangles on it. The way that they build this up, and even into Colin's era, they would always start this off with a story to kind of really wet the whistle. Now, this wasn't all that different from all the other songs, because at that point, Gabriel would interact with the band, with the audience, and tell stories, and this is kind of what he did within this piece as well. And when Colin would introduce this, Colin as well as Mike Rutherford, they would kind of do a tag team here because they didn't know which one was going to introduce all the songs. They would introduce it with the cinema show starting point. But instead of saying, no, I will be late for the cinema show, he starts, no, I'm hungry and supper's ready. And that's what would really kick it off. And these guys would play Supper's Ready as a pretty permanent set on their touring circuit until about 1983. They would only really play it in larger medleys, where they would only play the end sequence. And this can actually be heard on a live performance that both Banks and Rutherford released in a 1992 live album, I believe it is. But again, they only released like the ending sequence with that. And there's also a live performance with Bill Bruford from the 70s recorded on this, and Bill Bruford on the drums. Again, Bill Bruford's my favorite drummer of all time, so hearing his take within the drums is just a treat and just magnificent. Now, that was pretty much it from Supper's Ready until the 2000s. No band, at least that I could see, has dared to attempt to cover this. So there's not a whole lot of like actual recorded attempts of this within a cover. I know the Musical Box and tribute bands of Genesis tour live by playing this song. In terms of actually recording this song live, I haven't seen anything from that. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad, because it's really hard to really capture the same masterwork that was laid down before. Now, that was until, as I said, the 2000s, when Steve Hackett released Genesis Revisited 2, where he commissioned a whole bunch of prog legends, one of which being Michael Eckelfart from Opeth, to help sing and orchestrate this song. And then once he did that, and he toured with this, he put out 2 live albums kind of promoting this with Genesis Revisited, live at the Hammersmith and live at the Royal Albert Hall. And both of these see Nad Sliven on vocals, and Nad sounds very similar to a Peter Gabriel. But he also has Gary O'Toole on drums and percussion, and Gary sounds a lot like a more powerful Phil Collins, which makes sense being he's on the drums. So I was surprised to hear that Steve didn't kind of trade the two and let each one kind of sing their own little part. And so if we were to find a definitive version, definitely the live recording with Peter Gabriel on vocals within the whole costume changes, because that's really how this song needs to be experienced. So look on those for YouTube, and it really comes down to personal choice at the end of the day, whether you like the Collins version or you like the Gabriel version. If you like the Gabriel's theatrical version, where you've got all the costume changes and the very theatrical rendition, or if you like the Collins more soothing, more atmospheric and darker interpretation, it kind of comes down to which one you like more. I'm glad that we're able to experience all, and that's really what it comes down to, experience of the whole. And damn, is this a song that I can continue talking about for quite a while. But I think at this point, I'm going to leave it there. What did you guys think about this song? Let me know of your own impressions, of your own experiences with this song. I was lucky enough to experience this both live with Stephen Hackett when he played it for us in Toronto, as well as seeing it multiple times with the Musical Box, and experiencing it all around within the studio and live recordings that the band has put out. Let me know of your own experiences with Supper's Ready by commenting down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.